at 6 o'clock. In the first order of business tonight, during our work session, will be discuss the agenda items.
Mayor and Council, this evening on your agenda, on the consent agenda, item 4A are the minutes for the March 20th City Council regular meeting. Agenda or consent. Item 4B is a resolution amending Resolution 2018-019 R2 for the Citizen Bond Advisory Committee. The District 2 appointee was not able to serve on the committee, and she withdrew. So Councilmember Steve Rutherford is desiring to appoint Ms. Kim Malone to represent District 2. Item 4C is a resolution authorizing a one-year renewal option contract with Knight Erosion Control. This is for bag wall construction. This is one-year renewal on an original 2-year term bid. Knight Erosion Control has been our vendor for a number of years, constructing bag walls throughout the city as part of a cost-sharing arrangement for drainage control. The estimated amount is $60,000, which is what we budgeted in the drainage fund for bag wall construction.
Oh, do we have a waiting list for that now, or?
Sir, yes, we do have a waiting list. So John Bonner board meets with Knight Erosion after the award, so you can see what all the costs are in place, and we'll start prioritizing them. And a lot of it's also dependent upon after we provide them with the cost on the residents' ability to come up with their part of the money.
Item 4D is a resolution authorizing purchase of manhole rehabilitation services from In Situ Form Technologies. They are a contractor we've been using for a number of years as well for manhole rehabilitation, and this helps to cut down on infiltration and inflow through the manholes, which then increases our stormwater or our sewer flows and that we pay for. So In Situ Form would be rehabilitating these manholes. We have budgeted about 50 manholes to be coated under this contract. Funding of $65,000 is available in the utility fund for this contract.
Will that get us complete as far as the
This year?
Right. I don't know how many manholes we have to do. It seems like we're doing manholes
I think
every
by
year.
the time we finish, we'll be ready to
Start over.
Item 4E is a resolution approving a professional services agreement for design services for water main improvements and wastewater main improvements with Criado and Associates. This is to replace 8-inch water main generally along West Center Street and within the Center Ridge apartment complex, and at the same time we will go in and replace 8-inch wastewater mains as well in the same areas. These are old lines. The water lines are 1979 cast iron pipe lines. We're having a lot of water quality issues there. And the wastewater lines were installed as well in 1979 in our clay tile pipe. So since we're in there open cut for our water lines, it makes sense to do the wastewater at the same time. The overall project cost is estimated at a little over $2 million. So the design contract is $208,020. Criado and Associates, and they have done work for the city before. And funding is available in the CIP utility fund for the design of the project. Item 4F is a resolution authorizing the purchase of athletic equipment and supplies from DSN Sports This is for various types of athletic supplies for both the field house and the rec center. And this would be like soccer goals and nets, bleachers, baseball bases, tennis nets, wall pads, wall dividers, etc. We have in the past been below 50,000, but now that we are also purchasing using the same vendor for the field house, those expenditures are expected to be over 50,000. We do have funding available in the various budgets for this equipment.
Anything else on the consent item?
Those are all the items on the consent. Items for individual consideration. Item 5A is a resolution approving an economic development incentive agreement between the DC-EDC and the tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1 in the amount of $150,000. As we discussed before, the DC-EDC had approved a loan to the TIF of $150,000, and that was approved in the FY18 budget. We felt that it would be good to have an agreement between the two bodies that would memorialize then the loan and the repayment of that loan. And that's what this agreement is. It does provide for a 10-year loan payback within the 10-year period of that $150,000, and that the funds are used for the for projects that are set forth in the TIF project plan. The DC-EDC and the TIF have both approved, recommended approval of the agreement. Those are all of the items on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, sir. Item number 2, briefings and presentations. Item number 2A is discussion and input regarding a retention and stability bonus policy for the police department. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the retention and stability bonus. I'd like to begin by discussing police officer vacancies. And it's important to point out that police officer vacancies are not unique to the Duncanville Police Department and the City of Duncanville. The PowerPoint presentation that Assistant Chief Levigny passed out is a PowerPoint presentation that I received in October of 2017. I attended a training session with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And the title of this training session was Police Officer Recruiting and Hiring. And the ballroom was filled to capacity with police executives across the nation. And the common theme, the common discussion was police officer vacancies. And so it's important to point out that the challenge of filling vacancies has never been greater. I've had the honor of working in law enforcement for 31 years, and I've never seen it like this. It is a very difficult time for police agencies, not only in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but across the state of Texas, as well as the nation, in filling police officer vacancies. And so what I hope to do this evening is to highlight the recruitment and retention problems currently facing law enforcement and propose or offer what we believe is an innovative idea that will help us address retention in the Duncanville Police Department. Now, I realize that everyone can read, but I think for the benefit of our citizens that watching this presentation, I'd like to just walk you through some articles that's addressing police recruitment problems. The article is entitled, Why Police Departments Are Facing Recruitment Problems, Why It's Hard to Recruit Good Officers, and How You Can Benefit. And if you notice the date on this article isn't old. It's dated June 4th, 2017. It says the problem of recruitment and retention of police officers in departments across the United States is well documented. Many law enforcement agencies have difficulty not only identifying and hiring qualified candidates, but keeping them as well. High attrition in law enforcement. You've probably seen multiple stories about the critical shortage of personnel in professions like nursing and teaching, but probably not so much about the shortage of police officers. In fact, you have probably never heard of a study of the North Carolina Criminal Justice Analysis System which showed the attrition rate of police officers is higher than both nursing and teaching. The second article, if you look at the very top, it's dated March 18, 2017. Again, this article is not very old, and just for the sake of everyone that's viewing, I like to read it to you. It says, law enforcement, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. But what happens when no one wants to be that somebody? Numerous police departments across the country are desperately losing manpower with decreasing numbers of officers and recruits. Law enforcement is becoming less of a desirable career choice due to diminishing pay, high risk, and of course a recent bad rap, a trend that could put public safety at risk, saying policing experts. It says the current shortage afflicts police agencies from large metropolitan hubs to rural towns. Departments are struggling to find not only interested and qualified candidates to join the police department, and we are experiencing that. And the last article says police face severe shortage of recruits. With the number of applicants down more than 90% in some cities, police departments may soon be posting more signs that say help wanted instead of most wanted. From the nation's largest police force in New York to tiny departments with only 5 officers, far fewer people are looking to join the police force. And so what we wanted to do, Mayor and Council, we wanted to go back and we wanted to provide you with some data that shows our vacancies from 2007 to 2017. And the highlighted section shows the vacancies. But if you take a look at 2017, you will notice that the first quarter through the fourth quarter, we have a high number of vacancies. The first quarter, we have 9 vacancies. Second quarter, 11. The third quarter, 10. And the fourth quarter is 10. And the bottom number is just the number of authorized positions that this governing body has authorized for our police department. So filling vacancies and having an adequate staff is a two-pronged approach. First of all, we believe that you have to have aggressive recruiting. And here momentarily we'll talk about the aggressive recruitment methods that we employ here in the police department. And then retention of qualified police officers. So when we look at all the things that we are doing to aggressively recruit police officers, we believe that we're doing any and everything we can. We partnered with our public information officer. Cody has been very helpful. We partnered with our human resource department, and we posted ads on our website. We've asked family and friends to assist us with recruitment. We've asked our city employees from other departments to help us with recruitment. We placed ads with the Texas Municipal League, the Texas Police Chiefs Association. We recently took out an ad, a radio ad with the Fan. If I recall correctly, that ad was $3,000 or $4,000. We placed ads in the Focus newspaper. We've had press releases. We've used Indeed.com. And again, we partnered with our HR department. We placed an ad with Officer.com. And this governing body, and we really appreciate it, you approved sign-on bonuses for our new officers. We have a lateral entry program, and basically what that is when we go out and re-recruit experienced officers from other police departments, we're able to bring those officers in and start them above starting pay. For example, if we recruited a 5-year police officer, we were able to bring that 5-year police officer in and start them out with 5-year pay. And then we have a referral bonus. But despite all of those recruitment efforts, we continue to have vacancies in the police department. I wanted to walk you through our hiring process. And hiring a police officer is very different than hiring other employees. There's a lot that we have to do, particularly being a 143 city. We are required to have an entrance exam. And so a candidate has to sign up and pass that exam before he or she proceeds forward. And after the exam, we have a physical fitness exam. And so once the candidate passed those two steps, then there's an extensive background investigation that's conducted by our Personnel and Training Division. After that, we have a police structured interview. That panel is made up of 4 members of the Duncanville Police Department. If the candidate passes that interview, then we have a psychological exam, polygraph exam, and then we have a one-on-one interview with myself. And then we have a physical exam which determines the physical fitness and whether or not the candidate is drug-free. And after all of those things is done, we do something that's a little unique in the Duncanville Police Department, is we bring that candidate in 2 weeks before he or she starts the academy. And we have what's called an in-service program, training program. So we try to get that candidate prepared for the police academy. And then we send that candidate to the police academy, which is approximately 22 weeks in length. And then after that individual graduates from the academy, he or she comes back, and we have 2 additional weeks of in-service before we actually place the candidate in the field training, which consists of 17 weeks. So from the moment we hire somebody to the moment that person is able to go out and be a 1 officer that's capable of riding in the vehicle by his or herself, we're looking at probably about 43 to 44 weeks. So it takes a long time. But that's what you want to have when you have someone who has the ability to take your liberty in your life. You want that person to be well trained. So retention, let's talk a moment about retention. Retention of qualified officers is obviously our best recruitment tool. If we're not losing officers, then we don't have to place as much emphasis on recruiting officers. And it saves cost of hiring and equipping newly hired police officers. It costs us approximately $9,400 to equip a new police officer. And that does not include the maximum signing bonus that you approved. That includes the signing bonus for someone who is not an experienced police officer. So if we hire an experienced police officer, it's an additional $1,000 that's added to that amount. The most effective way to build departmental commitment and loyalty is to demonstrate how the department values employees by providing them with the support and tools to effectively do their jobs. So why should we consider retention bonuses? The first reason is we want to maintain the efficiency of our police department. We are a police department that want to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive. We want to go out and try to determine where crimes are happening before they happen. We don't want to react to things. We had a deployment unit that I had to stand down almost a year ago. And that deployment unit actually caught some robbers at one of the locations in here in our city. And they were able to sit on that location and surveil that location, but we don't have the manpower to do that now. Retention bonuses will control overtime cost. We have approximately $243,000 in our FY 17-18 budget. And that amount, actually we used almost $203,000 as of March 16, 2018. So we believe that obviously being full staff will control our overtime better. Improve morale. It allows our officers an opportunity to use their leave time, attend training, and not be called in for mandatory overtime. We must have a certain number of officers on the street at all times. We will not go below a certain number. So if we don't have that number, someone calls in sick, we have to call someone in to make sure that our patrol function is staffed properly. It reduces the number of officers seeking employment elsewhere, and it allows us to fill specialized positions If you'll recall, about a year and a half ago, this governing body approved a park ranger position. I've had to take that individual officer from those duties and assign that officer to patrol, just to ensure that we have adequate staffing in patrol. We also have a traffic unit. That traffic unit has 2 motorcycle officers. I've had to remove one of those officers and put that officer in patrol. We also have 8 detectives assigned to our criminal investigative division. I've had to remove one of those detectives and assign that detective to our to patrol. And then last but not least, it shows that we value our employees. So how did this come about? This was recommended by members of the Duncanville Police Association to address vacancies in the police department. We had an initial meeting on Monday, August the 7th of 2017. And there have been subsequent meetings to try to determine, is this feasible? Is this something that we can make work? And those subsequent meetings were between the HR department, the finance department, the police department, and the city manager's office to determine if a retention and stability bonus was achievable. And we also looked at, okay, what do we need to do as far as a policy development? How can we make this work? Then, of course, we're here this evening seeking approval from this governing body. So let's talk about costs. The bonus would only be affected if there's greater than 4 vacancies that's average for the entire fiscal year. So if we had 4 or less, this is not a policy that would kick in. Greater than 4, we would, myself and the city manager would discuss this, and the city manager would make a decision whether or not we would move forward. It's really important to point out there is no additional cost to our taxpayers, none. The bonuses would be paid from 1/2 of the cost savings incurred during the previous fiscal year from unfilled budgeted positions. So let's just assume that there was 7, 8, 9 vacancies, and let's just throw out a figure of $250,000. What we would do is take half of the $250,000. And once we take half of the $250,000, then we would deduct any overtime cost and other cost from the from the half of the $250,000. And then we would divide that by the eligible number of officers. This would not go to every officer. The newly hired police officers who have just received a sign-in bonus would not be eligible for this. The eligible officers will receive a lump sum payout at the end of the fiscal year, payable in the following months as a separate paycheck from their normal payroll. And so what we've done, Mayor and Council, at the last bullet point, it says estimate bonus if average was 10 vacancies. And so essentially what we did was we took an amount of $250,000 and we divided that by 50. That was the number of eligible officers, and that would give us the amount that you see at the last bullet point. So to summarize this, recruiting is a challenge. It's not only the Duncanville Police Department, but it's police departments across the nation. And this, during the council session, you'll see that we've contacted a number of police departments here in the West Southwest, and you'll see that they too are struggling to fill vacancies. This is not something that's just happened. We have obviously more vacancies now, but historically we've had a number of vacancies. Reduce attrition when larger than normal number of vacancies. It's really, again, it's important to point out that there's no additional cost to our taxpayers, and it reduces to 0 as staffing nears full staffing. Again, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to present this presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chief, I've got a question, because I think it may be causing some of the problem people have understanding this. Number one, the number of police officers we have on the street, actually on the street, Has that been reduced, or we pretty much got the same number?
Somewhat, Mayor. We have a policy in the police department that indicates we will have a minimum staffing at all times. We will still have that minimum staffing, but when we are at full strength, obviously we will have more officers assigned to those 4 shifts, if you will. But it has not impacted our Part 1 crimes. And when I do the presentation of the quality report, we have some graphs that we will show you with actual numbers to show it is not, our vacancies have not impacted our Part 1 crimes.
So you're gonna do that out,
Yes, sir.
out there tonight? then?
Yes, sir.
The chart I saw that Part 1 crimes haven't gone up much in 10 years.
That's
We're
correct.
talking about a high crime rate, and the way crime has escalated. Well, in reality, it has.
That's correct.
So, Chief, how does it control the overtime?
Well,
I wondered that too.
what happens, Mr. Rutherford, is when an officer has to be called in, and that officer has already worked his or her 80 hours or in that work period, we have to pay that officer time and a half for additional time.
The bonus itself is not going to control overtime, but what the chief was referring to was keeping those vacancies filled, keeping us at near full staffing or full staffing is what will control overtime. There will always be an amount of overtime for the police department for various reasons. But when you have more vacancies, you have to have other people coming in to fill in shifts, as the chief said, with minimum staffing. So the idea of the bonus is to reduce those vacancies.
So it's so what I'm hearing is that it's a reward for them working overtime for their morale so that they don't quit and go to another.
Right. So as things, it's basically, if you think of, vacancies of people leaving as a vacuum, as a whirlpool, is to keep more people from leaving. As people see others leaving, they go, well, I'm just going to have to work harder and work more. I might as well go look for a job too somewhere else. And so what this is to say, look, stick it out, stay with us. We're trying to get the vacancies filled. There's a bonus at the end of the fiscal year that we'll share with you, and then not all of it, just a half. We'll net out the overtime costs as well. But it's an idea of stay with it, stay with the program. And as you start filling those vacancies, that amount reduces, that bonus reduces.
Is it once a year or twice a year?
It
or
would
once
be
a quarter?
at the end of the fiscal year, so it would be once a year. Following, we would do it as part of the budget process, because then we'll know where our actual costs are, or be able to predict where our actual costs should be at the end of the fiscal
Will it be
year.
prorated for those policemen that have been, so I guess the new policemen won't get it.
Right, they would have to have been been a police officer for at least 1 year as of October 1.
And the other thing I had to work through in my mind, well, these officers are being paid time and a half overtime. Well, there's something besides that when you stop and think about it. They're under some more pressure because they've got a long call sheet they've got to answer. They don't have time to do a lot of the policing that they need to be doing out there. And after a while, you flat get tired. You don't want to work any more overtime. But they have to because of the position they're in.
That's correct.
Well, you also cut into some of the opportunities for training. If you've got to keep your staffing to a certain point, day in and day out, in order for personnel to go to training, they have to be taken out of that rotation, taken out of that daily role, and be allowed to have that opportunity. And it's something that TCOL mandates a certain number of hours every 2 years. And it's something that we, as a professional police department, that we want to make our officers as professional as we can and get them the training that we need. So when you get to that point and officers feel like they can't even go to training, then that becomes frustrating for them as well.
We don't want to burn our officers out, Mayor and Council. We want them to enjoy their leave time. We want them to be able to get away from here, enjoy time with their families like everyone else.
I want to know what you meant by net out overtime cost.
So the way that it would work would be that we would look at our actual personnel costs, which would include overtime, and we would take we budget for it full staffing. So that amount that's available minus our actual overtime, as the chief said, we budget about $245,000 for overtime. We're already at $203,000, so we're going to be well over our budget in overtime. But we will take that out, we will deduct that from the savings. So it's actual savings of regular earnings minus out our additional overtime costs and any other costs, recruiting costs, things like that. And then take half of that savings, and then that would become the basis for the bonus among the eligible officers.
Well, I suggest that you don't use the word savings, because I think all of us would not want that to be a savings. We prefer to have it full staffed.
So would it.
No savings. Well, I don't think we should use the word savings, because we don't want to save anything. We want it to be in full force. So it's just
Well,
what's
funds not
left.
expended.
How about leftover or whatever?
Funds not
Expenditure.
Yeah.
Earnings.
Again, Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this item.
Thank you, sir.
And so you're talking about two on that, a one-time deal.
It would be done at the end of each fiscal year, so.
Yeah, but now you're saying each fiscal year.
Well,
So,
up until if there's,
right, but are you
Four.
saying that this is a standard, that this would stand as a standard policy, or that this is a?
It would be a standard policy, but if we have 4 or less vacancies, then there is no bonus. That way, because we don't want to be doing this and going through all of this process if we only have 1 or 2 vacancies. And really, 1 to 4 vacancies is not going to materially impact the staffing of the department. You saw in the history, we have averaged around that amount. So if we hit 4 or less vacancies average for the year, then the policy is not in effect. Also, the other thing that we've looked at, and the way the policy would be written, is that any newly authorized positions would not count as vacancies for 12 full months, because that allows time then to recruit for that, fill that position. So if we up the staffing, we get to near full staffing, and we look at adding more positions, those would not be counted as vacancies for a full year.
So if we vote on it the way you presented it, when will the police be expecting their bonus check?
And that would probably be in October of this year, at the completion of this fiscal year.
How many vacancies do we have now?
yeah, can we see the vacancy thing?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. See when it was 4 or less.
And how many are now today?
Go ahead.
Today?
10.
10 today?
Well, I don't know.
Mr. Rutherford,
The
you
end of
will
the
see
last
that
quarter.
later in the quarter.
Yeah, I can see it.
That's 2017, so I'm talking about how many?
Yes, sir, we have 10 today.
Today, okay.
Yes, sir, however, we have 3 that will begin April the 9th, which will reduce that to 7.
I think we should try different avenues to try to recruit. Focus, that's kind of weak. There's a bunch of them that, to me, were weak. I mean, if you're going to do a newspaper, go to the Dallas Morning News. If you're going to go, I mean, you need to go to more aggressive places, maybe outside the city.
We're
other
certainly
cities.
open to everything, yes, ma'am. We are willing to do any and everything to recruit. That's why we have officers who are attending these types of training seminars and doing everything we can. We're communicating with other agencies to learn what they're doing. Any and everything we can to recruit officers, we're certainly willing to do that.
If the objective is to boost morale, why aren't we doing this sooner than October? Why aren't we doing this maybe twice, a March to get back, and then one in October?
We looked at that, and we felt that doing it at mid-year, we didn't want to commit to the funds. I mean, we would have 6 months worth of data, of estimate. We felt like it would be better to wait to the end of the fiscal year. And just do it one time, and then that way too, it's done as part of the budget process, and we can work it into that, because that's when we're doing our projected end of year estimates anyway. And I can't speak for the officers, Chief, if you could speak to as far as this idea and what their feeling is right now.
The officers love this idea. In fact, it was presented to us by the Police Association, and they're excited about it. And we're hoping that this governing body will allow us to bring it back next week for you to consider it.
And I think that, as he said, that his presentation out there will talk about staffing, where we are and where we were. And
Yes, sir.
that kind of stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 2B is to receive a briefing on the municipal drainage utility system to establish charges, exceptions, billing, and collections.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, this is an update on the drainage utility fee. Here's the applicable guidance that has been laid out in the capstone, as well as the work plan items as well. So there's a little bit of background. Duncanville has had a drainage utility fee program since 1997. As you notice, we've updated it 2000, 2010. And I'll show you what the current rates are, but it was based on parcel size instead of impervious area. And that's been challenged elsewhere. And so back in August, I think it was actually my second day here, Freese and Nichols did a briefing on a concept that we'll present to you again tonight. We're looking at impervious area, which sort of better correlates the fee structure with how much they contribute to the stormwater. We've had a bunch of staff coordination between my folks and finance trying to work out some of the nuts and bolts. In February, we talked a little bit more about implementation challenge, got the ordinance through legal, the drafts, which brings us tonight to get some final guidance from y'all prior to finalizing the ordinance. So just a little bit of background again. What does the drainage utility fee cover? Administration, which is a significant portion of the budget. It's the 4 FTEs is full-time equivalent, so we partially fund several positions within the directorate, but together they aggregate to 4 full-time positions. Also pays for operations maintenance as well as our compliance with MS4. In addition, that's our source of funds for capital improvement, the erosion control, which is the bag wall program that we talked about earlier tonight, as well as any work for the drainage infrastructure and any studies and master planning that we would want to pursue. So again, this is the current drainage utility fee structure. Really what I want to highlight, because we'll talk about it a little bit later, is if you notice under the commercial you have 6 tiers, but they are linked to parcel size. So, and I'll show you some imagery showing you sort of the fallacy in that model. And as you can see as well, that the fee is relatively arbitrary. What else you'll see with the church properties and Duncanville ISD properties are currently treated basically as a house in terms of the rates. And so again, here's some pictures. This is an illustration of the current policy. So you notice there's one house, and what we're talking about impervious area is the roof and the driveway and a little bit of sidewalk. And then that's $3.50 a month. If you look at this typical commercial small structure, their fee of $25 a month is tied to the size of that property of 170,000 square feet. But in reality, you notice that just a little bit, it's almost like a small house that's been converted. But they're being paid for the entire thing. And then if you look over on the far right, that one is being charged $35 a month, but you see the whole property is basically one giant impervious area. So this is what, again, we brought up, and what we're proposing is that we look our drainage utility structure so that it's set up that the fee reflects how much stormwater is contributed to the stormwater system. So we based on impervious area, which again is the pavement and roofs, instead of just the parcel size, the size of the lot, because the grass, that doesn't affect anything that's, you know, it's where it's supposed to be. The way we would determine the fee, we would divide impervious area into what are called equivalent residential units, which reflects the average contribution of a single-family residence in Duncanville, which was set at 4,300, was measured to be 4,300 square feet. So basically, if you had an impervious area of 43,000 square feet, that would be the equivalent of 10 homes, the contribution of 10 homes in terms of stormwater in our system. And so re-looking this, those same pictures, again, we look at the residents. What I do want to highlight is that we're not changing the value of the house. So it still maintains $3.50, and in fact that is the basis for all the calculations. And again, looking at that same property on the small property, or the small impervious area on the large property, it would go from $25 a month to $17.50 a month. And then for the large, it would go from $35 a month to $4.90. Now, when we get to the end of the slides, there'll be some discussion that we would like your guidance on in terms of possible caps and some other things, you know, based on your input to help us craft it and what you see, where you see you want us to go. Just to throw in some comparisons, this was a slide. The cities that you see here was from the Freese and Nichols briefing. But again, the 350, you notice that at our $3.50 rate for housing, we're at the low end of the price range for the Metroplex. Moving into a sample small commercial, we're moving from being at the very bottom of the spectrum to still within the very competitive range at $21 based on the $3.50 factor. And then finally looking at a large, in this case the Costco, where we at $35, which is negligible when you look at the balance of the Metroplex, and we would go to something more in the middle. And again, subject to input later in the presentation, where these, if you elect to put in some kind of cap, then that would also move us further to the left. Just to do a little bit of a comparison, right now the existing fee structure, as you notice, the single-family residences, the ratio of expense is weighted significantly towards the housing. So 74% is the residents, and 26% of the contribution is the commercial areas. And then you'll look at two proposed fee structures, and again, we'll talk more about it, but this is implementing a fee structure where the school district and the churches are not exempt. So it moves to 58% for the residents, and then if council elects to exempt the school districts and the churches, then the ratio is expands a little bit. But again, it more balances the ratios between non-residential and residential. So again, this is where we're asking you for your input. Based on the previous discussions we had, was getting some guidance from council on how you want to treat the school district property and churches. Whether you want to give them some or no exceptions, treat them as a commercial entity. Basically, hey, the rain that gets collected and put into the system is what you need to pay for. A partial exemption, whatever you would see, like right now they're charged as a house, or a full exemption. That would be some guidance that we need from council to complete the ordinance. some guidance on implementing the increase. I think some of that will be target. You know, we can talk through that as we look at some of these capping. If we elect to not implement a cap, or depending on where you want to draw a line on a proposed cap, if might want to change how we implement it, phasing it in, or hey, it's not that big of, you know, we don't think it's that onerous, we'll do it all at once, kind of thing. And I'll follow up with another slide. But again, as we were looking at the distribution of all of our non-residential properties, which I'll show you on the next slide, staff is recommending a cap of 200,000 square feet of impervious area, which would max properties out at $164.50 a month, based on the current ERU rates of $3.50. And we also recommend maintaining the non-residential property minimum fee, which is currently set at $10. Let me show you some supporting information. I think this will help put this into perspective. Up at the top is a selection of, or sampling of some of the non-residential areas for your consideration. These were nominated by Jessica. So you can just see what kind of fees we're talking about. Again, this represents no cap. So you're talking, you know, Masco, $1,000, and then the Duncanville High School, which is the largest impervious area in town, could pay up to, you know, $1,582 a month for their stormwater fee. Now, if you look at the bottom, this is a distribution chart showing where all our commercial buildings fall. So you notice we really have WB, Costco, Masco. When this chart was done, the schools were not included, but again, imagine further off to the right of Masco is Duncanville High School. There's also another Duncanville ISD property that's in the 1 million square foot range, but really you're looking at WB, Costco, Masco, and 2 ISD properties that are the outliers. The reason why we recommended the 200,000 for us was that's really where it really flattens out in terms of the distribution curve. We had looked at capping it at 400,000, where that sort of everything really ends, but there's really nothing, nothing would be really affected. And then if you wanted to cap it at 500, really you're, there's only one property, commercial property, that's out there. So these are the things just to consider as we try to craft it, just to get your input, and subject to your questions.
I like your approach, because you're basing it upon how much water they're putting into the system based on the area that you have to do. I would probably say that we do need to cap some of the big ones.
What about Duncanville High School though? That's
Well,
the biggest one.
So what you're doing is you're having a small business owner subsidizing the large business owners.
Well, I don't know if they're subsidizing, because everybody is paying $3.50 at ERU. What it is saying is that after a certain point of size, the fees become, you know, it's in my opinion, very onerous to businesses that are in town.
And, well, let's talk about what they're getting for that. Now, I know you can't in Duncanville have a car wash, because the oil and stuff on the cars wash down into the sewer, and we have to end up paying for that. And I know that in Duncanville, you can't go out and spray your parking lot down. There's a special procedure you have to go through, because that water runs off into the
oil and stuff.
which they do at midnight anyway. I don't know if y'all know that. But
I'm
you know,
using bed
so
right there.
so that's what they're drawing in, people with cars who have oil leaks and junk on their car and gum and, you know, whatever. It's being thrown in the parking lot. They clean the parking lot, a big rain comes and it washes it into the sewer system. So that's who should be paying for it, not the ones that, you know, have a little insurance agency or that may attract 1-2 car a day. So yeah, sure, it's high, but that's because they're using it, and and we're paying for it, and so we're asked to redistribute that so that it's fair, and I'm uncomfortable redistributing it to the little guy. At Duncanville High School, I don't know.
I think they
With
should
their
pay more.
budget, they
should pay more of their portion.
$1,500. It's not. It's nothing.
No, again, these are by per month, so this
Yeah,
is,
I know.
okay.
$1,500.
It's not really redistributing it, because what we're not shifting cost over so much. By changing the structure, we're making it more legally defensible, because it is based on impervious coverage. But it is also, will bring in more revenue based on this new structure. So, by capping it, all you're doing then is saying, well, we're not going to bring in quite as much revenue. But this still, even at the cap, brings in more than what we're bringing in now. For most of the businesses, a lot of them will they're still going to see change. But some of them, you know, that's a big change. That's a very large increase from $35 a month to $490 a month. And we also, I think, have to be mindful of what is that signal, what is that message to our business community? What is that also doing for the surrounding area? If we go back on the charts on the distribution of cities, DeSoto is actually fairly low. Cedar Hill's not on there and Lancaster's not on there. But I think we have to be mindful too of how do we compare to our best Southwest cities. If we want to attract businesses here and retain the businesses we have, I think we need to keep that in mind. So that's why when we looked at it and looked at the chart, we felt that 200,000 square foot was probably a good break point to cap it at that.
So this $164 a month for 200 square foot, do you have a mechanism that will go up as the increases like inflation or costs go up, or will it have to come before the council every time
So-
you want to go up?
So there would be two different, I guess, decisions. One decision would be assessing the value of an ERU, equivalent residential unit. So if we say, I guess there's a few ways. You can say, well, you know, things are more expensive now, and so we decide that instead of $3.50 per house, we're going to charge $5 a house. And then all the math changes, and then because this impervious area doesn't change, it would just be the value of one ERU would increase. I'm sure council could also say, well, we're going to keep houses at $3.50, but ERUs, which is the factor that we determine how we charge commercial districts, could go to 5, or whatever you decide you want it to do. The 200,000 down the road, we could reassess it and do another curve based on the current status of the properties. It would take like Freese and Nichols coming back out and doing, they'd looking at all our properties, and maybe the distribution curve has changed, and now 200,000 is no longer, you know, sort of where the peak comes off, and we move that. We are recommending maintaining the $10 minimum fee. If you're concerned about the smaller, really small businesses, maybe drop it to 1 ERU. So a building that's less than 12,000 square feet of impervious area, maybe like a small shop, maybe they get $3.50. So that pulls drops the low end, you know, cap, you know, versus, I mean, so that's another option.
Is there any break for retention ponds?
Yes. So the ordinance that we're proposing would allow that if, say, we'll just use the Costco because that was one of our items. They say, you know what, I don't want to pay because we don't cap it. I don't want to pay $500 a month. So they make a business decision to maybe rip up some of their parking and put in a retention pond, then they could, in fact, reduce their amount of impervious area, which would then reduce their fee.
The Costco has a retention pond,
Yeah.
but you're still putting that water, it's just a slower rate
Yeah,
into the
the
system.
question is, the total water's gonna run off, it's how fast is it
It's gonna run off, that's
The
right.
last 30 years or so, we've required retention on all commercial property in Duncanville. And it's basically, they have to hold whatever 20 or 30 minutes of a 100-year storm before they start releasing it. So it doesn't affect the total water going out, but it affects the peak flow hitting the creeks.
But the way the ordinance does, it does give credit for doing stuff. And if in fact you can prove that you capture everything and it just sits there, then you would be able to then appeal. Again, those are ways for that businesses could limit their exposure is by doing different, making business decisions to capture as much of the water as possible.
Well, the 200,000 doesn't bother me. Now, I do think that we know what our inflationary costs are gonna be from TRA or whoever. And I would like in some way have those in there so that we wouldn't get behind.
This is stormwater.
Stormwater, it's not treated, that's right, it's not treated. Okay. I'm saying
Yes.
sanitary service.
It's not treated yet.
Big yeah.
It will be soon. And one of the things that you have to understand, when you do this, there has to be an element from the engineer to hook this to the ERUs. I've always thought that our fee based on parcel size was not defensible.
And it makes good
And we
sense.
did it that way because when you introduced this many years ago, there was some concern about driving your business out of town, and now that we've put it in place, it's time to bring the fee up to the ERU measurement, because we know that's defensible. So if you go up or down or do exemptions, you need to listen to Greg and how we do that, so we make sure it's defensible, because we don't want to charge it only after refund or something.
Then what about the school, the high school? Because that was the biggest.
That exemption is up to, that's policy
Political.
issue for the council
Huh?
to
That's
consider.
just a political decision.
You know, from
Churches
some
and
stand,
school district would be a policy issue up to you to decide how you
I mean,
want
they're
to.
still adding to the system, you're
They are.
correct, and so that's
He said it
policy.
was the biggest offender.
Well,
Was the biggest collector of stormwater.
Not a
Yes, all the
fan.
Contributor.
together. it
Okay,
doesn't-
here we go with semantics again.
Well,
You brought it up.
You brought it up.
I did indeed.
I
I say again, they
I got
are.
a phone call this
The
past
biggest
week, and
offender.
this is why I'm a little sensitive to this. It's a senior center, a senior lady who's retired, fixed income. And she doesn't understand the difference between stormwater and sewer water. But she just knows that her sewer water is twice the amount as her water, the amount. And she told me that she flushes every other time and takes a shower every 3 days and some other things because lets her grass dry because she can't afford it. And what I'm saying is this is the optics that would, we need to, everyone should pay their fair share. And I'm just leery about the homeowner. $3.50, you think that's not that big a deal, but, if you're gonna get, excess and it's gonna go into the CIP, well, that's less money that we have to take from the homeowner from their wastewater. Because, am I wrong about that? Am I wrong about that?
It's a separate.
It's a separate, this is a completely separate fee. And again, the homeowners,
But I'm talking about for like, maintenance.
Well, it's funding maintenance right now. The problem is we don't have a whole lot of extra money for capital projects. So we do the bag wall project and we do a few small drainage projects. We don't have the money to do the more extensive drainage projects that we probably need to be doing. This will add to that and give us a little more revenue. It is a more fair structure. It's not changing the residential side of it at all. It is increasing the commercial side. And we're still competitive when you look at the whole Metroplex, but it is still a big change to the businesses that are here to what they have been used to. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And also, again, too, where are we going long range with it? This gives the flexibility to gradually increase it as we need to and as we see. But to do it all at once, I think would be hard on a number of businesses.
If we do it with the mind that we can gradually increase, I'm for that.
I mean, we talk about
I
a
thought,
phase.
Leslie, you were concerned about the issue that we're talking about, and no one is saying is the school.
Oh, I'm for doing the school.
But no one is saying that we're gonna do that. Everyone is talking about, because if we drop it down to the 200,000, that will include the school. So we need to make sure that, am I right that is that what you're?
I'm with
If
it,
you want to
with it.
include them
No.
as commercial, or if you want to exclude them,
We need
or
to
give
exclude
them a
them.
partial.
You want to exclude the school?
As commercial, so that they don't get the 200,000?
Yeah, I think Patrick's saying charge them the.
Oh, no, I don't want to exclude the school. They want-
No, they would be, I mean, that's a quiet
That's what
break
I'm
for
saying.
them.
I'm saying-
You know,
He's not saying don't charge them, he's
Yeah, I'm
saying
not-
don't give them
yeah.
the cap.
Don't give them the cap.
So-
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
tier-
saying.
You're saying double negative?
So tier the
That's
cap,
okay.
adjust
Don't
the
not
cap
charge
based
them.
on, like, commercial property, you're saying 200, but no cap on ISD. Is that what I heard?
Well, the charges,
I would caution that. I mean,
I think they
how
are
you
capped.
should, remember, that's one school we're talking about, not all of their campuses, and that's a significant increase to them. And then how you look at the churches as well, I think you should be looking at the
There
schools for
should
churches
be-
similar.
There should be some incentive for them, the user, or the impervious people, to build retention ponds, quit buying up so much stuff that you get exemption, and other people have to bear that cost. So that's why I support charging the schools.
It's the size of a college campus.
There's got to be an incentive for them to stop the expansion.
It's a policy decision of the council, and it's up to y'all.
Because, I mean, it's not free. Someone has to pay for it.
Well, with the churches, of course, they don't pay taxes
No.
per se, but I think that they do need to make some contributions, because they are there, they exist, and we have to service them. So I think that they should make some contributions into.
Mayor, why don't we bring back plain and peanut, one with exemptions and one without, and one with a cap, and then you'll get to choose.
Okay. Fine with me.
And you have a problem defending what we're talking about?
Well, I just don't want it to be arbitrary, and it's hooked to the ERUs, so we'll figure out a way to do that with the ERUs. We can do the cap. I think a cap is fine, but you have to be careful of, and it's based on, as Greg has indicated to you, why he reached that conclusion of why the cap was, he thought appropriate for you to consider. I'm fine with what I heard from him there. What you've got to be careful of is exempting the school and not exempting the Masco, or vice versa.
I agree.
Because now it's to me somewhat arbitrary.
Yeah.
Now, the justification that you would talk about is they pay, their money comes from the taxpayers too. So all you're doing is taking the money out of this pocket and putting it in this pocket. So those are conversations that I think that are
Then,
appropriate.
like to remind the council that their bus barn is right in the middle of Duncanville. So that's, it has to be
And-
impervious.
Maybe what we'll charge, I would charge him, I think it'd be fair if you're gonna not put the cap on them and put the cap on the others, is what kind of, is it parking lot, is it rooftop, maybe do a distinguishing factor there, see what we come up with. But I think if you're not going to treat a large property owner like the school district, that campus, different, then there's gotta be some reason for it to be treated.
I'm not saying that it's not possible to distinguish roof from parking, but that would have to go back.
For the purpose of the exemption, not for the purpose of establishing an ERU.
Well, are you talking about them doing that on every property?
No,
Okay, because I don't know if we have the data on.
no, there's a way to write that. For any property over X amount.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
It seems kind of a joke when you look at Skateland getting 20 and Duncanville High School getting 350.
But-
Caitlin's tiny.
Well, that's the current policy, and that's part of the
That's what we're trying
problem with
to
the
figure out.
current structure, is that it is not
It's never been
equitable.
that
It
way.
needs to be
At least
changed.
this structure is more equitable, and it is fair, even if you cap it at an X amount and say that all of these above it are still paying this maximum amount, it's still a lot more equitable and fair than what is in place right now.
So the grass that you had up there, is that with the caps in there?
No.
The three?
Grass.
Oh, these
What
graphs
else
here,
doesn't
so
count?
what I looked here was basically, the right-hand side would be where the ISD and the church pay nothing. The middle one would be where we treat the ISD and the church as not exempt. So they would pay, this chart here with the 860 reflects no caps. So
That was
this
my question.
this is like, this reflects basically about the most that this would bring in based on the amount of the commercial properties, the amount of properties that we have.
So you don't have a chart with caps on it?
I'm sorry, sir?
You don't have a chart with caps?
I don't have a chart showing caps. I worked up some scenarios that would probably help with certain caps.
It's only 4 properties.
But I have, there was like 12 different scenarios based on different courses of action. But, the main thing, what we're really talking about is, depending on, how you orient it, because when we get to the caps, really we're talking about is dollars. So we're looking at something, maybe a low of 790-ish to a high of 8.
Correct.
High 8s.
With the 200,000 square foot cap, how many properties would then be above that would be capped?
Okay, yes.
Out of how many properties
So-
were we looking at?
So let me go back to the this chart here. So if we capped at the 200,000, what we're really looking at is to the right of the $200,000 arrow are 41 properties in town
Out of how many total?
out of 859.
And I would like when you come back to tell us what the revenue loss would be if you cap it.
Cap it there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, I have that. Now, if we had no maxes, no mins, with just the county and city properties exempt, we would make 860, 275, which was on that chart. If we had a 200,000 square foot max, no minimum, so it would be 789. As our recommendation.
About 71,000.
Right, yes. If we had the 200,000 square foot maximum, the $10 minimum for commercial properties, it would be $805,000.
How many properties are over 200,000?
41.
41 properties. To answer your, you were asking about, you were worried about the smaller properties, and if you wanted to lower the min, at the $10 minimum, it was 286
$10
properties.
is reasonable.
Me too, I don't see a
Yeah, I
problem
don't
with
see,
$2.
yeah.
Because that's what they're paying now.
Yeah, no.
That's correct, yes,
So
sir.
it's not,
Don't-
no increase.
Don't see a problem with what, I'm sorry.
Lowering the
With,
minimum.
Lower.
Oh.
oh, Lord,
Okay, so leaving it there.
yeah, just leave it there.
So, yeah, so really what we're talking about with is the difference between no max, a $10 minimum, or I'm sorry, $200, 200K max, $10 minimum would be 805,000. With no max, so everybody pays up to the 1582.
About 55,000.
It would be, well, it'd be 876. So we're talking $70,000 a year if we charge like Duncanville, Masco, Costco, and keep going up to wherever their full rate.
Well, with the exception of the schools, they're big tax producers for us too. I mean, they contribute a lot, like Masco and Costco and things like that, tax standpoint, ad valorem sales.
Well,
we'll come back with the different options as Bob suggested, and we'll run the numbers so you can actually, so you can see those dollar figures and see how it changes and varies among those different scenarios next time. I think that was, did we got all input?
Oh, that was it, yes, sir.
Okay, we've now run past 7. We have not gone into executive session. You've got 2 things on there. One is about property between 67, the long description there, and the other one is the salary, city manager. Do you want to do this after our city council meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Here, everybody shake your head, yes. So,
Take it with you.
okay, so we will recess this meeting at 7 p.m. And we will re-adjourn after our city council meeting, so 7 p.m. now. 7:15. I will now call the city council meeting to order. Our first order of business tonight will be our invocation, led by Bishop Brian Bowman from the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Following that, we will have pledge of allegiance to our flags. Please stand.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, as we come together this evening, we're grateful for the opportunity of being citizens of this community, for the opportunity of being able to do thy will. We ask a blessing upon this council, that they may be led and guided to do what's right, that they may be able to do what is best for the citizens of this community. Bless the members that live within this great city, that they may be able to love one another and be able to compromise and serve and help each other. We ask a special blessing upon our police and fire and others that serve the people of this great city, that they may be protected and guided while they serve us. And we ask once again a special blessing upon this council, that they may be able to do thy will and do what is right and best for this community and the citizens of our great city. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge the allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Well, as far as our mayor's report tonight, I want to remind you that in the next couple of weeks, our Duncan Switch is coming up. And we certainly want to continue to promote that, because that's a promotion of small businesses all up and down Main Street. And we encourage you to come out. There are great buys from a lot of the vendors that sit up there, as well as all of those shops along Main Street, that we encourage you to support these shops. They need our support. We need them in Duncanville, and we need them to prosper. So please be knowledgeable of that and do your part. Council member reports. Councilwoman Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For my report tonight, I would like to defer to Chief Brown, who wants to make a special presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hugman. Mayor and Council, I wanted to take this opportunity to present one of the highest awards we have in the police department before this governing body and members of our community. I'd like to ask Assistant Police Chief Mark Lavigny to join me at the podium, please. Mayor and Council, at approximately 11:30 a.m. on October the 26th, 2018, Assistant Police Chief Mark Lavigny was attending a meeting in the City Council briefing room located at 203 East Wheatland Road in Duncanville, Texas. During the meeting, Assistant Police Chief Lavigny heard loud voices and possible screams coming from outside the City Council briefing room. The loud voices and screams were in the area of the employee work cubicles with lead Assistant Police Chief Lavigny to believe that something urgent was occurring outside of this location. Assistant Chief Lavigny immediately got up from his seat and exited the City Council briefing room and discovered that an employee in the Finance Department was experiencing a life-threatening medical emergency. The employee was choking due to vomit blocking her air passage. Assistant Police Chief Lavigny ran to the employee's workstation and discovered that she had fallen on the floor, had vomit in her mouth and nose, and was unable to speak or breathe. Assistant Chief Lavigny was able to clear the employee's air passage, which restored her breathing. He stayed with her, by her side, to comfort her until paramedics arrived. And so, Mayor and Council, this is, again, one of the highest awards that we have in the police department. It's a life-saving award, and I wanted to personally present this to him before this governing body. So, Mark, I'm very proud of you. Congratulations on receiving this award.
Thank you, Chief. You know, I'm just glad that he was able to work through me that day, and I'm glad that we had a great outcome. Thank you.
Just real briefly, I wanted to acknowledge some other employees that have received this award. In 1997, Officer Jeff Edison received this award. In 1998, David Moon received this award. 1998, Lieutenant Stan Estelle. 2000, Stan received it a second time. In 2000, Ralph Woods received this award. Stan received it for a third time in 2001. In 2002, Ben Luna received this award. 2009, Dirk Yantz. 11, Ben received it for a second time. In 2013, Dwayne Mayo received the award. In 2014, Joe Emmett received the award. 2015, Kyle Welling. 16 was Nathan Roach. 16 was Kamisha Johnson, and 17 was Andrew Pachaka. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir, and congratulations, and thank you, Mark.
Mayor and Council, if I could also take another minute, I would like to recognize another employee as well. The same event, I had the opportunity the next day to hear the 911 call, and our Assistant Finance Director, Tia Pettis, did an outstanding job on that call. You could tell that the stress, but there was no panic in her voice. She was very clear and concise in the call, knowing that it was her friend and colleague there, but she did an outstanding job, and I think she also deserves some recognition. So thank you, Tia.
Item number 2A is proclamations, and we have one tonight in recognition of National Library Week. Councilwoman Jameson's going to present that.
Whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions fueling efforts to better their communities, campuses, and schools. And whereas librarians are organizers and information experts who for centuries have guided people to the best information resources, providing not only the facts but also the expertise and services that add meaning to those facts, that they may gain knowledge and understanding that will help them live fuller, healthier, and more rewarding lives. And whereas librarians continue to fulfill their role in leveling the playing field for all who seek information and access to technologies, especially as our society is at a critical juncture regarding the changing information landscape and the skills needed to thrive in our digital world. And whereas libraries support democracy and effect social change through their commitment to providing equitable access to information for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. And whereas libraries work to serve all community members, including people of color, immigrants, people with disabilities, and the most vulnerable in our communities, offering services and educational resources that transform communities, open minds, and promote inclusion and diversity. And whereas libraries provide forums for diverse ideas and points of view that help us better understand each other and ourselves, and whereas libraries are looking beyond their traditional roles, providing more opportunities for community engagement and delivering new and innovative services that connect closely with the needs of those they serve. And whereas the Duncanville Public Library and its personnel have supported the educational, economic, and cultural interests of our community in these ways and more since 1955. And whereas libraries, library workers, and library supporters across America are celebrating National Library Week, now therefore, I, David L. Green, Mayor of the City of Duncanville, Texas, do hereby proclaim National Library Work April 8th through 14th, 2018, and urge all citizens to visit their public library this week, engage with their librarians, and explore the world of possibilities that awaits them there.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, City Council, Mr. Mayor. It's been a pleasure to serve the Duncanville community for the last few months that I've been director. I have a wonderful staff, and we strive every day to serve the citizens of our community, and I look forward to many years of continuing that work. Thank you.
Item number 2B is to receive a presentation from Patillo, Brown and Hill, LLP, on the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2017, including the independent auditor's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. On March 28th, the Audit Committee, which consists of Councilman Rutherford, who's our audit chair, Councilman Dennis Schwartz, and Councilwoman Leslie Thomas. And also we have two community volunteers. We've got Patrick Harvey, CPA, who's actually in our audience today, and also James Talley, CPA. So the committee met with the staff and also with Patillo Brown Hill to discuss the fiscal year 2017 audit findings and the comprehensive annual financial report. At that time, it was reviewed. The city did receive an unmodified or a clean audit opinion, and that's the best that the city could receive. And the committee at that time accepted the audit opinion and also the CAFR at that moment. So here I have tonight, I'd like to introduce Todd Pruitt, audit partner for Patillo Brown Hill, to give an overview of the audit.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the council for giving us the opportunity to perform the audit this year. And I'd like to give special thanks to the city's finance department, to Richard and Tia, and everyone that we had an opportunity to work with during the course of the audit. As you'll see when we go over the results of the audit, they really did an excellent job of providing us the information that we needed in order to do our job. If you look at the city's comprehensive annual financial report, you can see the document is over 100 pages long. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into preparing that document by the staff, and they have to do so while responding to our requests for documentation and audit requests and that type of thing. As Tia mentioned, I had a chance last week to discuss the results of the audit in detail with the audit committee. What I'd like to do tonight is to just briefly go over the results of the audit, and then if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address those. If you look at the city's comprehensive annual financial report, you'll note that this report is segregated into three sections, three primary sections. Both the first and the third sections are actually unaudited sections. The first one is the introductory section. You'll note it's numbered with Roman numerals. And the third section is the statistical section. It begins on page 94. As I mentioned, those are unaudited. There's a lot of good information included in those sections, and I encourage you to look over them, but the primary focus of our audit is on the middle section, or the financial section. If you'll turn to page 1 of the financial section, you will find our independent auditor's report over the financial statements. And what this report basically says is it's the responsibility of the city to prepare these financial statements in the financial section. It's our responsibility as your auditors to express an opinion on the financial statements. As Tia mentioned, we have expressed what's called an unmodified opinion, and it's sometimes referred to as a clean opinion, and it's the highest form of opinion that we can issue. And what it really means to you is that the financial statements that you have in the financial section have been audited by our firm, and in our opinion, they're free of any material misstatements, and they're presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You'll note at the last paragraph of the independent auditor's report that our audit was performed in accordance with government auditing standards, and those standards require your auditors to do a number of things that go beyond just generally accepted accounting principles, one of which is to report on the city's internal controls over the financial reporting process and compliance with laws and regulations, grants, and contracts. That report is on page 1 of the city's single audit report. As I mentioned, the first section of that report deals with the city's internal controls over the financial reporting process. And what we're really talking about here, as your auditors, in order to plan and perform the audit, we have to gain an understanding of the policies and procedures that you have in place over preparing these financial statements. If while doing so, we identify any deficiencies in those controls that we think are significant, either in the design of the controls or the operation, we are required to report them in this report. And I'm happy to report there were no significant deficiencies that were identified during the course of the audit. The second part of the Government Auditing Standards report deals with compliance. As your auditors, as part of obtaining assurance that their financial statements are free of material misstatement, we perform a number of tests with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. And these are things that we believe, if you have non-compliance, they could have a material impact on your financial statements. And you'll note in this report on page 2, there were no instances of non-compliance that were identified during the course of the audit. The third and final independent auditor's report that we've issued immediately follows the Government Auditing Standards report, and it begins on page 3. You may recall that any local government in the country that spends over $750,000 of federal grant awards in a fiscal year is required to undergo a compliance audit of those federal grants in conjunction with your financial statement audit. In your single audit report on page 6, you'll see a schedule entitled The Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards, and you'll see on that schedule that the city expended roughly $883,000 of federal grant awards during the year. The way this compliance audit works is your independent auditors will perform a risk assessment of the programs and select certain programs for testing. The program we selected was the one that was passed through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's the Medical Assistance Program, which was your ambulance services grant. We tested that program for compliance with a number of different compliance requirements that we felt could be material to the program. These are things like allowability. Did you spend the money on what the grant required you to spend it on? If you had any matching requirements, were they met? Did you comply with all of the reporting requirements? Had there been any findings or question costs? They would be listed at the bottom of page 8. And I'm happy to report there were no findings and question costs in the federal grant program audit. So to summarize, it's a very clean audit. You've got a clean opinion on your financial statements. We have no significant deficiencies that were identified over your internal controls, and there were no findings or question costs that were identified during the course of the audit. I'd like to congratulate the city on the results of the audit, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to congratulate Richard and Tia and the entire staff. They work hard to make sure that this happens. And we've also received awards because of the outstanding job that they do. So we're very proud of our financial department and the way they keep up with things and get these clean audits every year. Item number 3 is citizens' input. I want to remind everybody that during the election season, until after the elections are over, we do not broadcast on television our citizens' input period. So at this time, we're off the air. go into our consent items, and they're items number A through F. And I'll ask the city secretary if she will read the captions to those.
4A, consider the minutes for the March 20th, 2018 City Council regular meeting. 4B, consider a resolution amending resolution number 2018-019R2 to provide for the appointment of additional members to the Citizen Bond Advisory Committee. 4C, consider a resolution authorizing a one-year renewal option for number 15-21 erosion control services with Night Erosion Control, Inc. in the unit amount bid with an estimated annual expenditure amount of $60,000. 4D, consider a resolution authorizing the purchase of manhole rehabilitation services with Insutuform Technologies, LLC through buy board contract number 555-18 for the unit prices bid with an estimated expenditure amount of $65,000. 4E, consider a resolution approving the terms and conditions of professional engineering services agreement number 18-080 for design services for water main improvements on West Center Street from Cedar Ridge Drive to North Horn Street, water and wastewater main improvements along current alignments within Center Ridge Apartment, existing easement and water main improvements along Center Ridge Drive from Cedar Ridge Drive to the Center Ridge Apartments with Criado and Associates, Inc. in the proposed amount of $208,020. 4F, consider a resolution authorizing the purchase number 17-40 for athletic supplies and equipment from BSN Sports LLC through the buy board number 502-16 in the estimated amount of $75,000.
Council, the chair will entertain a motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, so will you please vote? Thank you. Item number 5 are items for individual consideration, and item number A is to consider a resolution approving an economic development incentive agreement between the Duncanville Community Economic Development Corporation, the DCEDC, and the Duncanville Tax Increment Financing Reinvestment Zone number 1, that's the TIF number 1, board in the amount of $150,000.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. I'd first like to start with the background on this loan. On December 20th, 2016, the City Council approved Ordinance 2295, which established or created the TIF to help support the redevelopment and revitalization efforts of the Camp Wisdom Road area. The final project plan and finance plan was also approved by City Council during the July 18th City Council meeting. And then the DCEDC, after this, recognized that without seed money, it would take multiple years for the TIF to really generate needed funds to complete initial projects that could have a significant economic impact to the area as well as to the community. So on June 8th, 2017, the DCEDC unanimously approved a 10-year, $150,000 incentive loan to the TIF number 1. Staff highlighted the $150,000 loan between the two boards during the City Council budget workshop on June 29th, as well as provided that information again to City Council during the August 10th budget workshop. The City Council went on to approve the DCEDC budget, which included the $150,000 on September 19th of 2017. Moving forward, on February 22nd, the TIF board unanimously approved the 10-year, $150,000 incentive loan from the DCEDC and agreed to the terms that the DCEDC established. The terms and conditions of the agreement include that all funds must be used in accordance with the Texas Local Government Code, chapters 501 through 505. And basically what those are the laws that govern the use of Type B or Type A funds. Second, all funds must be used solely for the projects as set forth in the TIF 1 project plan that was approved by City Council, again, on July 18th and 2017. If there's any deviation or want to use those funds otherwise, they would first have to be approved by the TIF board, then by the EDC, and final by the council before those funds could be used outside of the approved project plan. The TIF number 1 board will keep a detailed statement for the use of all funds for each project, including the date, time, place, and proposed completion date. We do this currently with all the EDC projects, and this would follow suit. And then last, the board would provide a full repayment of the loan from the tax increment funds to the DCEDC on or before January 31st of 2028. And again, that accounts for the 10-year time period. So with that, I just included a map just to remind the council and the audience in terms of the geographical boundaries for the TIF, and I would be happy to answer any questions the city council might have.
Again, this is just to formalize in a written agreement what has already been approved by the council.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So that's what this document is all about. I have Councilwoman Jameson.
So this is just for the 1 year? It's not like every year?
It's a one-time loan for $150,000 for a 10-year period. That is correct. A one-time $150,000 loan. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Anyone else? Chair will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
There's approval and a second. Seeing no further discussion, will you please vote? Thank you very much. Item number B is to take any necessary action as a result of the Executive Commission. We recessed the Executive Commission because we ran out of time. So at this time, I'm going to recess this council meeting at 7:53. We will reconvene the executive session to discuss 2 items as listed on the agenda. Following that, we will adjourn the executive session. This will be done in the briefing room. And I will open up this session, the general session again, to take any necessary action that we need to take. And I then will adjourn this meeting in the briefing room. Yeah. Okay, we do have a staff report. One of them we pulled tonight, item number B, because of illness in the finance department, and we will reschedule that for an upcoming council meeting. And so at this time, we do have one, and that's item number 6A, to receive the police department quarterly report.
Mayor, just so the record's clear, you're taking this report before you recess and do executive session, correct?
Sir, I'm
You're
sorry.
taking this report before you go into executive session?
Yes,
just so the record's
I'm going to
clear.
rescind what I just did, and we'll take this report. Then we will adjourn this meeting, or recess the meeting. Okay.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Police Department's quarterly report. I'd like to begin with discussing staffing in the Police Department. Stephanie Strahl just recently graduated from the Police Academy. She is currently in field training, and she is doing very well. Trevin Green just also recently graduated from the Police Academy. He is currently in what we call in-service training, and he will begin his field training experience here in another week. We have 2 recruits that are currently in the Police Academy, Stephanie Norman and Ashton McMillan. Both are doing very well. Also, we recently hired someone who graduated from our Citizens Police Academy, number 55. She has been hired as a public service officer. And public service officers are individual civilian positions that address our jail. We currently have 10 police officer vacancies, but as I indicated to you earlier, we have made 3 offers to 3 candidates, and they will actually begin on April the 9th, next Monday. I wanted to include this slide because we're going to talk about Part 1 crimes. I'd like for this governing body and our citizens to see that our vacancies have not impacted crime in our community. And so when we talk about crime, when we compare crime of one city to another city, we are actually comparing these 8 crimes. And the FBI chose these crimes based on their seriousness, the frequency of occurrence, pervasiveness in all areas of the country, and the likelihood of being reported. So again, remember that these are the 8 crimes that we will be comparing. We prepared this graph because we wanted you to actually see whether or not our vacancies have impacted the Part 1 crimes that occur in our community. And so when you look at the very top graph, the green graph, you're going to see large numbers. And those numbers, I realize it's difficult to see, but if you look at the very bottom, it's year 2007 through 2017. And each year has 4 quarters. So if you go to the very end of the bottom in year 2017, if you take a look at the blue line, you will see the number 9, 11, 10, and 10. Those are the number of vacancies that we had during those respective quarters for year 2017. Now, if you look immediately up to the green, you will see that those numbers are low compared to the other Part 1 crimes for previous years. So we wanted to be very clear. We wanted to show this governing body and our citizens that that high number of vacancies have not impacted our Part 1 crimes. In fact, for that time span, quarter 1 through quarter 4 for 2017, you will see that our Part 1 crimes are actually very low. We wanted to also compare our Part 1 crimes to other best Southwest cities. And at the very top, you will see the city of DeSoto, the Part 1 crimes. The blue line is the city of Duncanville, and the red line is the city of Cedar Hill. And as you can see, our Part 1 crimes are not very high compared to those other cities. In fact, we are right in line with our sister city, the city of Cedar Hill. For 2017, you will see that we have approximately 1,300 Part 1 crimes. We also contacted our best Southwest cities because we wanted you to see the vacancies that they have in their police department. The city of Cedar Hill has authorized 71 sworn positions. Right now, they actually have 69 of those positions filled, and they have 2 vacancies. The city of DeSoto has 77 authorized positions, and they actually have 65 on staff now, and so they have 12 vacancies. The city of Duncanville, we are authorized 61 police officers. We are 10 down. We currently have 51 on staff, and so we have 10 vacancies. The city of Lancaster has an authorized strength of 63 officers. They currently have 56 on staff, and they have 7 vacancies. And the chief of Lancaster indicated that he is going to request 5 additional positions in the FY 18-19 budget. We had a civil service exam on January the 27th of this year. We were pleased with the number of applicants that took the test. Obviously, we would like more, but this is a higher number than the previous test. But only 46 of those applicants passed our written exam. And those applicants stated that the City of Duncanville's website, advertisements placed with the Texas Municipal League, and personal references was how they learned about the vacancies. Again, we discussed these earlier. These are some of the recruiting strategies that we used. We've used radio ads, newspaper ads, printed ads in magazines, online job postings, Facebook, Instagram, job fairs. And we also, several years ago, we went to military bases to try to recruit, but that did not prove successful for us. Over 90% of those applicants who took the entrance exam stated that they found out the police department, again, through our city's website and personal references. We discussed this earlier. We have a very difficult hiring process, and that's what we want. Again, when you have the liberty to take someone's freedom and their liberty, and their life, rather, we want to ensure that we're hiring the best candidates. Retention, we talked about this earlier. Retention is a major issue within the Duncanville Police Department. In an effort to curb this trend, the Duncanville Police Association presented the retention bonus to myself and the city manager in August of 2017. We've talked about why a retention bonus is needed. Unemployment is at record lows. Job openings are at record highs. Participation in the labor market is at a record low, and a dramatic increase in our retirements. If you have an opportunity this evening, perhaps you've already done so, if you'll take a look at your annual report, you will see that a number of our executive team has retired. We have at least 4 members of our command staff that have retired recently. So retirements have impacted our staffing. There are many and varied opportunities for candidates. Not only are we competing with law enforcement agencies, but we're also competing with the private sector. And then the negative perception of law enforcement. Quite often we see use of force incidents on our evening news. And with the 24-hour news cycles, there are a lot of young candidates who are not interested in being in law enforcement anymore. And then it allows us to incorporate what we believe is an innovative approach for recruitment and retention that no other law enforcement agency is using. Our department was one of the first in the Metroplex to equip our officers with body-worn cameras. I went back and looked at my notes, and we actually began to discuss body-worn cameras in December of 2013. We actually acquired body-worn cameras from L3 Mobile Vision. It was new technology at that time, and technology has advanced. And so our current body-worn cameras we're having a lot of issues with them. And so we're in discussion with 2 companies, Exxon and WatchGuard, to replace our body-worn cameras. And we hope to have one of those companies hired and move forward with new body-worn cameras here very soon. We are looking at implementing what we call the lethality assessment program. This program was created in 2005 by the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. It's an innovative strategy that prevent domestic violence, homicides, and serious injuries. And it's been adapted by a number of police departments throughout the Metroplex. And essentially what we have, Mayor and Council, is we have a questionnaire that our officers will be trained on, and we will actually ask a number of questions when we respond to the domestic violence calls. For example, some of the questions would be, have you ever been, has he or she ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon? Has he or she threatened to kill you or your children? Do you think he or she might kill you? And so as the officers ask these various questions, depending on the number of yes answers that the officer gets, it's going to automatically trigger a protocol where we refer the victims of domestic violence to a number of organizations that can help them get out of that situation. We hope to begin our training in July of 2018. We wanted to report some of our activity from our SWAT team. We executed 2 narcotic search warrants, and we recovered some narcotics, cash, and weapons at those locations. And we also, the SWAT team also provided security at the City of Duncanville's Christmas parade. You have your annual report today. I'm very proud of that report. It's actually done in-house, with the exception of the printing. Our staff, crime prevention officer, and our coordinator, Randy Cosby, actually put that together. So we're really proud of that. We are looking, as I indicated to you earlier during the briefing session, we want to be a police department that's proactive. And so we have a number of burglary of motor vehicles that are taking place at some of our locations throughout our city. And so what we're implementing is a BMV reduction initiative. And so those two documents to the right will actually be used by our volunteers as they go out in the community. They're going to evaluate vehicles. For example, if they see purses or they see cell phones or they see laptops and things in the car, they're going to actually check that that vehicle failed, and they're going to put that on the windshield. And what we hope to do is just encourage our citizens not to leave those gifts, if you will, in the car for burglars to take. A number of the vehicles that are stolen in our community have keys left in them. Oftentimes they're running. And so we just want to educate our citizens. We want to help them not lose their properties, if you will. And these are some of the use of force incidents that have taken place. We had 13 use of force incidents. And each and every time our officers use force, we evaluate that to ensure that it meets best practices. We have 3 vehicle pursuits. All were found to be within department guidelines. And then we had 3 citizen complaints. We had 1 in November, 1 in January, and 1 in February. The 1 in November was externally generated complaint against 2 officers failing to properly investigate a road rage incident. The complaint is currently being investigated. In January, the allegation of rudeness, the complaint was externally generated and the investigation was classified as unfounded. And then in February, we had a complaint of dereliction of duty, and this complaint was sustained. And these are just some of the community meetings and partnerships. Our crime prevention officer, Doug Siss, and our staff, entire staff, we believe in getting out in the community and interacting with our public. And these are the number of meetings and the partnerships. The partnerships are the individuals that we tally doing those various meetings. And this is our Part 1 crimes, January through February. And so when we look at this year to date versus last year to date, you will see that the grand total for last year was 203 Part 1 crimes versus this year for the same period, January through February, we had 201 Part 1 crimes. So again, our vacancies have not negatively impacted our crime rate. And then also, Mayor and Council, if you recall, about a year ago, I did a presentation and we discussed our response time to calls. And our response times are still basically the same. It has not impacted our ability to respond rapidly to our calls for service for our citizens. So Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz.
Would you put the slide back up that showed the staffing in the 4 best Southwest cities and the
Yes, sir.
vacancies? Could you tell us which of these cities operate under the same civil service rules as we do, the state law?
Yes, sir. With all 3 cities, DeSoto, Duncanville, and Lancaster, are all 3 143 cities, which is state civil service. Cedar Hill is not.
Do you think that impacts the fact that they're only down 2 officers?
That's a very good point. Yes, sir, it does, because civil service requires us to have a written entrance exam. Cedar Hill is not required to do so.
Thank you, Chief.
In other words, if under civil service, if you got a good police officer and you would like to go ahead and hire him, he has to take the exam, and depending on where he scores on the test, you have to take whoever scores the highest first and then second, third.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Councilwoman Jameson.
Well, and so what's wrong with not doing that?
I'm sorry.
Why wouldn't we want to change to that since they don't seem to have a problem with hiring?
Citizens did it.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Why are we a civil service
Well, civil
city?
service was voted in by our citizens. That's not,
So is it charter
that's not something that, yeah.
by the citizens?
Yes.
Well, that may be something that we need to look at. Also, in my district, I have a lot of phone calls about gunfire. And they are not pleased with their response. And one fellow told me it took 20 minutes for a police officer to come. He talked to him and left. And the next day, the man across the street had bullet holes in his windows with casings on the ground. And I know during the last election, when I went to pick up my signs, and I went into that district, it was about 9 o'clock, into Fair Meadows, and we heard gunfire while we were there picking up signs. And my husband said, shut the door and let's go. We're not staying here. We don't know where they're coming from, what's going on. So, it is a problem, and it happens all the time. Is that counted as a crime up there in the statistics?
Well, it would be a crime, obviously, but what we would have to do is we would have to locate that person, or a citizen would have to see that person firing a gun. It is against the law to fire a firearm within our city limits. And it's a very difficult crime to determine who committed it, because once a person calls and they hear gunfire, our officers respond, and we attempt to locate that individual or individuals who fire those weapons. And oftentimes, by the time we get there, they're gone. And so what our officers will do is they'll collect those rounds. We'll try to determine if there are any surveillance systems. Perhaps a family, a homeowner has a surveillance system, or a family or the caller can identify an automobile. We do our best to identify those individuals who commit that crime, and if we can identify them, we will arrest them. We had an incident on April the 1st also where a citizen called in on gunfire in the 1000 block of Duff Creek, and we made an arrest. We made several arrests. It's just very difficult, Ms. Jamison, to make arrests in those incidents, because we have to arrive and we have to gather enough evidence to say that this person or persons committed that offense.
What about the company that came to us, Shot Spotters?
That's a conversation that myself and the city manager are having. We are having ongoing conversations with that company.
And so where is it right now?
That company, we've reached out to them and we requested some information, and we hadn't gotten that information back yet.
Okay, so back when they made the presentation, or recently, or?
No, that was after the presentation.
Okay, because
I spoke to them just about probably 3 weeks ago, I think, and they apologized for not having gotten us that information that the chief had asked for. They were also supposed to send us some information that they were looking for from us for data that they could analyze, and then we were going to meet. So we're kind of waiting on them at this point to take that data, to get the data from us that they want, or tell us what they need, and then also to provide some additional information.
Okay, that is, to me, really serious. It's getting more and more prevalent. I don't know why, but I know when we had our roof replaced, the roofer found bullet holes where they had, we didn't even know about it. They'd, I guess, been fired and fallen into the roof. So.
Well, I can assure you, Ms. Jameson, that's not an offense that we ignore. When we get calls of shots fired, we want to get there as quickly as we can, because we don't know what's occurring. Someone could be robbed, someone could be domestic violence, it could be a number of things. And so our officers take those calls very seriously. And more often than not, when we arrive, the individuals who are actually doing the shooting are gone. And so at that point, we're left with collecting spent cartridges and trying to determine who is responsible for committing that offense. And it's not an easy offense to solve.
Well, I guess because we're down on officers, because we just need more in the neighborhoods. We just need them. I think people would be reticent to do something like that if there was an officer coming down the street periodically. And I know that, I can just say that when I first got on the council, I used to hear that was the one department that there was no problem with, was the police department. And now I hear it all the time. They don't feel like there's enough police, where are they, what's going on, that people don't feel safe. So just passing that on to you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, yeah, we do. Councilwoman Thomas?
Yes, thank you. I just like to pass along, I have a business in District 3 that calls me sometimes every other week, sometimes I see them out in the community, and they're expanding, and they're really, really trying hard to stay in Duncanville, but it's landlocked. We don't have the land. They probably won't stay here. And the only reason why he's got claws into staying into Duncanville is because of the police. He has disruptions at his business. He picks up the phone. They're there in less than 5 minutes. He said that's the only I mean, he can go right across the line into Dallas where there's property, but he says, I give up the Duncanville police protection. I give up that quality of police. And I just want to pass that along to you, that there's people that value that, and that they're just so thankful that Duncanville has the tremendous police response, and he works very well with the businesses.
Thank you very much for that comment, Ms. Thomas. I've been in law enforcement for 31 years, and I've worked for 4 police departments, and I'm truly honored to work for the city of Duncanville. I'm truly honored to lead the Duncanville Police Department. I can tell you, and I know I'm biased, but I can tell you that the men and women of the Duncanville Police Department, they work very hard. And as you can see by our Part 1 crimes, it's their efforts that helps keep those Part 1 crimes despite the vacancies that we have. So thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no further lights, it is now 8:18, so we will recess our general session at 8:18. We will reconvene in the briefing room, and we will go into executive session. And then after the executive session, we will close the executive session. We will, if there is, we'll open this meeting back up. If there's things to be presented or discussed, we'll do that, and we will adjourn out of the briefing room. So thank you for being here tonight. Well, we're reconvening the council meeting. It's at 10:07. We have concluded our executive session, and the action that was taken in the executive session was to approve a salary for the city manager, and it will be a 4% increase of gross. And it will be effective on March the 30th, his anniversary date. I believe it's March the 3rd.
And that would have to be in the form of a motion?
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. So if somebody wants to make that motion, we get a second.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we raise the city manager's pay 4%, and it'll be effective on the date of his contract, anniversary date of his contract.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Clarification, that's 2018, March 2018.
Yes, effective, yes. Put the date in there. Okay, seeing no further questions, will you please vote? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate it.
That concludes our council business, so we will stand adjourned at 10:08.